Get rolling.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to be back here today. And what we're going to talk about today are the risks of self-activating. Um, this is something I've talked about in a lot of different ways over the years in these webinars. And I wanted to hit it again because I think it's largely a really scary thing for the kinds of clients that I work with and for people in general. I think self-activating is an essential ingredient in a secure functioning relationship. Like your sexual template and your likes and your dislikes, there is a wide range of what that can look like and a wide range of that being functional. And like sexual relationships or sexuality, there are some basic components that have to be there, or it's not healthy. It's not even a relationship. So with healthy relationships, I don't think you can build any kind of good relationship without self-activation. Lots of other things you can add to that, but that's got to be part of the base. Now, what self-activation is it's simply the ability of both parties to show up, speak up, act as separate and distinct entities. That doesn't mean that you're acting in opposition to each other all the time. It means that when something is not going in a way that works well for you, or you have a differing idea or opinion or preference, simply put, self-activation means that you say it. Hey, this is what I think about this. Or a lot harder for people to do is to say exactly what they want in their relationships. We're not going to get into the why that's hard. That's attachment, that's personality, that's all sorts of different things. And I want to keep this more focused on, like I try to every webinar, I want to keep it focused on things that you can turn into direct action right now for your relationship, whether you're on day one of your relationship recovery or day 1000. So there is no relationship without differentiation of the partners. In other words, it's not a real relationship if it is two people who are exactly the same. Or what I see tend to happen more often, it'd be one of two arrangements. It can be one person who has strong opinions and desires, and the other person just mirrors or echoes. Or just as often, I see two people who mirror and echo, and there is nobody, putting the rudder in the water. Those relationships, lo and behold, they tend to lack safety, and they tend to lack passion. They tend to lack excitement, and they don't move forward. They don't produce a lot. It is I think, ironclad law of the universe. If you want growth, there has to be conflict. If you want heat, there has to be friction. It's the same thing in relationships. Without differentiation, there is no compelling reason for a relationship to exist. Because what a relationship is, and why it can be such a blessing, why it can feel so great, is because it's two people who are not the same, who don't think the same or feel the same or come from the same background, deciding that it is best for both of them that they work together, and them co-creating an environment, an ethos, a couple bubble, secure functioning agreement, whatever you want to call it. They co-create something that never existed before, that is better for both of them than it would be for them to remain alone. That is what fascinates me most about relationships. That's what I think is so beautiful about them. Is number one, there are things that we do. Relationship is something we do for one another, and we do collaboratively. And number two, it's endlessly fascinating to me that there are so many different configurations of a good relationship that actually work for people, that totally represent the two people in them. I think that's endlessly fascinating and so cool. Some reasons why we don't do self-activation. especially in recovery. I want to put this in terms of, at first I was thinking like a pros and cons list, but I really think it's more of there are some positive risks. Think about that like buying stock, just straightforward buying stock, not being one of those day traders that, games the system and makes my brain hurt. But straightforward, like investing your money, there is a positive risk there, meaning if things go well, I end up with more money. I end up with an increase on my investment. If things don't go well, that's part of the risk that I was taking. It's not like that's abnormal in this or something went terribly wrong. It's just it's part of it. And then there's negative risk, which is not only do things not go in the positive direction or in the way that we would intend, but the negative consequence is really, I'm going to use the word exaggerated, but I don't mean like unnecessarily. I mean, the negative weighs a lot. The negative consequence or the negative side of the risk is really, really painful. Both these positive risks and negative risks, I think, come together to explain why we may not self-activate. But I hope that as we talk about this, you can see some of the benefits and you may be able to start challenging yourself to self-activate in the direction of some of the positive risks. So let's start negative because our minds go there naturally anyway. The top of my list of negative risks is rejection. That could vary anywhere from the rejection you feel when you go to your favorite ice cream shop and they're out of your favorite flavor and there's nothing else that you want. This mild disappointment, this like, shucks, that's what I wanted, but it's not there. I'll have to try it again. Or it could go all the way to like a rejection that feels like it's a referendum on your personhood, a referendum on your worthiness, a referendum on your goodness and the place you should take up on the planet. Rejection is painful. I think it's one of the most painful experiences we can face as human beings, especially if we are in a place in our life where our history says that we can only see the immediate impact of rejection. The immediate impact of rejection is always loss. It's always a feeling of shame to some degree. There can be some long-term benefits of rejection or some long-term consequences that we like of rejection. I think of relationships in my life that went wrong, and at the time, it sucked. That's the last thing I wanted. I'm so grateful that there was a rejection now. I certainly wouldn't have been the one to call it. I remember my second girlfriend in high school, the day she broke up with me, it was over the phone, and I was surprised when I hung up how great I felt. I had not realized the ways I contorted myself to try to make that relationship work. And in fairness to her, it wasn't a good relationship for her either. But there was a long-term effect of that created room in my life for some other things. And it also got me thinking about, why did I tolerate a relationship that felt that way for so long? Another negative risk is abuse. Sometimes we find ourselves in a relationship where differences or no, or I don't want to, is met with abuse, coercion, anything that falls in the non-consensual category. As children, if abuse was on the radar for you, you would have learned to not self-activate. If I draw attention to myself, if I create a problem, I'm going to get mom or dad's wrath, or they'll ignore me, or they'll be mad for a while. That's definitely a negative risk, a possibility. I think it's important at this stage in your recovery to determine if you're worried about abuse in reaction to self-activation. It's important to place that on the timeline. Is that fear of abuse coming from what I have experienced with my current partner? It has happened. There's a pattern. I can expect that. And or does that fear of abuse come from my past? This is how it always worked with mom and dad. This is how it always worked with my family. Because whether you're on the recovering addict side of the equation, or the betrayed partner side of the equation, or the recovering partner side of the equation, your past does affect you. And it's important to consider that the faster you can orient to your past in early recovery, the better you can see clearly what's going on right now. So there is a risk for abuse. Try to place where the risk lies. Is that a historical risk based on my past relationships that I'm not in anymore, or I have boundaries around? Or is that a risk of this current relationship or this current opportunity to self-activate? The anger of another person could be a negative risk of self-activating. And I would differentiate that from abuse, because anger can be a basis that abuse comes from, but not every person who's angry becomes abusive. Anger is a normal, natural emotion. It just so happens to be one of the hardest emotions for a lot of people to deal with. So from the standpoint of they're going to be angry with me, for a lot of you, myself included, that's a big consideration. You may, depending on where you're at in your recovery progress, you may start asking yourself, number one, can I really not stand someone to be angry with me? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no, I can do better with that. It's okay if you're angry with me. Not that I'm giving you permission, but it's not going to kill me. Number two, is that still a compelling reason for me to stay silent, stuck, not speaking up? They say in recovery that when the pain of the problem outweighs the pain of the solution, then we will make a change. Same thing with anger. There are times where for a long time in your life, that can be the thing that kind of rules the day, until one day you say, enough's enough. I don't care if you're angry with me. This is what's true for me, or this is what's going on. Discomfort can be a negative risk. Again, that falls in the same category of anger, depending on what your history is, what your attachment style is, a lot of different factors. Discomfort can be unbearable. Maybe you're reeling from a discovery, and one more iron in the fire would just be too much. That's a real thing. So again, gauging, where am I at right now? How much discomfort can I handle? Because I will say there is no, at least for me in my experience, there is no self-activation scenario or opportunity that would be completely comfortable for me. And I have a high degree of confidence in saying ever. It would never be comfortable for me, because it's always hard. But again, sometimes I have the bandwidth for it, and sometimes I don't. And being able to gauge that can help you determine if it's worth the risk. There can be abandonment. Think back to your family of origin. If you grew up in a closed or enmeshed or dysfunctional family of origin, sometimes differentiation through self-activation meant we're splitting, or I'm not going to be here for you, or, you know, how could you? That's not how our family works. So there can be real abandonment. I include with that divergence. Divergence is actually also in the positive risks category. Sometimes divergence needs to happen in a relationship. That may not mean the dissolution of the relationship. It may mean a recognition that we need to make our scope of what this is about wider. Because maybe we thought all along we were supposed to do this, and that's a good relationship. It can be just as good a relationship to be doing this, except when we're apart like this, we're not ignoring each other. We're watching each other. Hey, how's it going over there? What's happening? Can't wait till you're back. So again, based on your attachment history, your trauma, all sorts of things, divergence may be unbearable. It may also be something that you really want. No, I want us to branch out here, or it's time, if this relationship needs to go in separate directions, I'm ready for it to go in separate directions. And then the last one I put on there, and these are by no means a comprehensive list, the last one I put on the negative risk side is you may not be understood right away or at all. For a lot of the folks that I work with, that initial frustration of not being understood is so great that they don't try again, or they start telling a story about, nobody wants to listen to me, or my partner's so obtuse, or why don't they understand me? Which I understand. It's not like that feeling is made up. Sometimes we really don't have the energy in us to explain it again, or to say, no, you're not understanding me. Let's go over this again. Or let me try to say that another way. Sometimes you don't have the energy for that. And sometimes, again, we equate that with, this is what a good relationship is two people just intuitively understand each other. And, they ride off into the sunset, and you complete me, and all of that Hollywood crap that we think means love, but really doesn't. So let's talk about the positive risk side. This would be like when you decide to exercise or move your body, or again, invest. There's always discomfort. There's always something that you are giving up front. But your mind frame is, I give this up front in hopes that I get something a lot better. The positive risk side is not, I'm expecting doom and gloom, or it's doom and gloom as possible, also great reward as possible. So on that, I put on the top of this list here, there's no more, or at least less, mind reading. Now, that may not be what your relationship decides, and we'll get to in a minute the role relationships play in how self-activation is handled. But at least you won't be supporting that culture if you decide that I'm going to self-activate. My favorite example of this, those of you who are fans of The Office might remember this. I don't remember what season it was, but the character Kelly and the character Daryl were dating. And I won't explain who they are as people, you just have to know. And the show is famous for these talking heads. They interview, it's a documentary style show. So they're interviewing Kelly, and the question we suppose is, how are things going with Daryl? And she says, Daryl Philbin is the most complicated person I have ever met. Who says what's on their mind? Who says what they're thinking or feeling when they think it? What kind of a sick game is that? I think that's hilarious, because it's actually not a sick game. That's actually really healthy. But if your relationship culture is, we're supposed to know each other, or if I have to explain it and then you do it, it doesn't count. That's mind reading. And it's also mind something else, insert the expletive. It's not real healthy. And when you decide on self-activation, you may open a door for your relationship to say, yeah, that's crazy. Let's just say what we mean and feel, and we'll deal with it. Or at the very least, you are no longer contributing to the dysfunction in that way. I'm not going to expect you to read my mind. I'm not going to expect you to read your mind. So I'll tell you, and I'll ask questions about what you're thinking. Another positive risk is there's differentiation. Like I said earlier, that is necessary. It's a necessary ingredient for a healthy relationship. We have to experience ourselves as separate, distinct individuals. We don't think the same way, feel the same way. We don't have all of the same values. Hopefully, and this is another necessary ingredient for a relationship to work, your values have to be similar enough that there needs to be enough agreement on your values that you're not totally opposed to each other all the time. But differentiation is good. Like I said, there's no heat without friction. There's no movement without resistance. There's no growth without pain. Another positive benefit is definition. I distinguish that from differentiation. I have observed again and again with couples who will start an argument and they are very unclear on the terms that they're arguing about. They don't even know what the problem is. And I don't say that critically. It happens all the time. We think that what's clear to us is clear to others, and it's usually not. So speaking up and saying, okay, what I mean by accountability is, or what I mean by honesty is, what I mean by transparency, what I mean by acceptance is, We only get to those definitions. Remember, there is no, if you want to run your relationship by a dictionary, be my guest. If that's your thing, I won't yuck your yum, but by and large, how a relationship works is built on how the two people define the components, not what Webster says about it, or not what our neighbors are doing, or even what our therapists say about it. It's up to us to decide what this means, and we get on the same page with that meaning. So that only happens if you are willing to take the risk of thinking and feeling differently than your partner. In line with that, negotiation, which I would say is the gold standard for handling relationship problems, not compromise. Negotiation doesn't start until both sides are clearly known. There's no need to negotiate if there's no friction. There's no need to negotiate if I'm your echo. There is a need to negotiate, but we don't know that because we think we're in agreement on everything, or we think we should be in agreement on everything. That's the way you get a relationship that's great for both of you, is from negotiation. And again, negotiation only starts if we can see and acknowledge and understand that there's a difference in our motivations and there's a difference in what we want. Again, I said divergence is on both. So sometimes a split or a divergence is what's necessary. And the only way we get to that is if at least one person speaks up and says, I don't think we're headed in the same direction, or I don't want to go in that direction. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean the end of the relationship. Sometimes the best arrangement you can make, what's actually good for both of you, is identifying, you know what, this thing is not our thing. That's your thing. And I fully support you in going there. And there may even be times, you know, I'm thinking about couples I've worked with religious or spiritual differences. Maybe as we self-activate, we understand that worshiping together or having the same set of beliefs actually isn't the most important thing to us. For some couples it is, and that's fine. But we may realize that what we do on, you know, Sunday morning, for example, it may be good for us to have a divergence. You go fill your cup this way, I'll fill my cup this way, and we'll come back together when it's all over, and we'll have a better time together than if we were trying to both get our cup filled in the same way from the same source. The last thing I'll put on the positive risk size, and this kind of relates to the first thing on the list, is it starts a cultural change, a cultural shift, which, by the way, is never comfortable. My wife and I were talking about this last night with our 13-year-old. We were talking about what we're observing and how his friendships work and what happens for school with him, what's important for him, what's not important for him. And our initial reaction for both of us was like, oh, I hope he's going to be okay. I hope he'll turn out all right. And then we got talking about it. I think every generation feels the way about the next generation. Oh, they probably got it all wrong and they're probably not going to be okay. Sure, our world's on fire, but it hasn't exploded yet. So there is some benefit to a culture changing or shifting. One thing I'm noticing with my son, and I think this is even an improvement on my generation, it's really easy for him and his friends to talk about how their relationship is doing and things that they want to change about it. I did some of that with my friends, nowhere near as much as my son does. And I know that my parents did not work that way with their friendships. So cultural changes and shifts are good. We are organic creatures, and generally, I don't think we're smart enough to figure out everything that we need to know and how we need to act 300 years ago, and we can just stay the course. So I would say for couples in recovery, you need a cultural shift in your relationship, because the old culture allowed lies and deceit and disconnection and lack of maintenance on the relationship. And I hope that's not what you're wanting going forward. So just a word about the role relationships play, or what you can do for each other as far as self-activating goes. Like I said, it's never comfortable for me, and I don't think it ever will. be. But as a couple, you two can decide if this is an important thing. We're really going to minimize the hell that either of us have to pay in either activating ourselves or listening to the other. So if this is something that we want to have happen, we need an environment that makes it really easy for our brains to access that. So if both parties decide that this should feel good to us, this should be beneficial to us, then they start rearranging themselves in their relationship so it actually can. Because, like I said, that's not the nature of activating ourselves. Activating ourselves is full of risk. It only starts to feel good if you and your partner decide that it should, and you will make it so. So what that would look like is, I know, Scott, you've talked before about seeking integrity, like your fair fight agreement. That's a good example of how we're going to handle self-activation. We think this is important. So when we're in a fight, we're going to do it this way so that self-activation isn't impossible. It could be a commitment to curiosity and compassion and, maybe even a little fun in exploring one another and getting to know each other's point of view. It could be slowing down the pace at which we move into problem solving after one or both of us self-activate. Because a lot of times if you jump on, okay, now here's the solution, if you jump on that too fast, you or your partner could feel dismissed or overlooked. And that's where you might hear the sometimes fair criticism from your partner: you don't listen to me, you don't care about me. It's not about what you're proposing is crap. It's that I don't even know that you felt that because you came out right like that with a solution. So some things to think about. Again, like I said, I don't think you get a healthy relationship without self-activation. And I would encourage all of you to consider, use this list of positive risk and negative risk as a starting point for you to understand your relationship with self-activation, why you feel the way you do about it, why you use it the way that you do, or don't use it the way that you do.
Thank you, John. Type some questions into the Q&A. We've got one in there already, but I got a couple of things I want to ask you, or at least just state. To me, I've always thought any relationship without conflict or disagreement would be insanely boring. I mean, how can I know that I like variety, I like new, I like learning, I like changing, I like growing. And if there's nothing that forces me to grow in a relationship, that relationship, I'm just going to get really bored with it. And not that I'm a drama queen, because believe me, I'm not. I mean, the less drama, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But no drama, but do people think that their relationship is supposed to be 100% drama and conflict free?
Some do. And there's also, Scott, I guess I don't know you well enough in this way, but I would assume that maybe you haven't always felt like lack of conflict is boring. I know there's times where I have felt like the less conflict we have, the better relationship we have. That can come from culture, that can come from media influences, that can come from trauma. I think that it's a sign of evolution, or a sign of us becoming more okay with the complex, to say, this seems like a pretty normal part of the human condition. So maybe I'll figure out some ways to engage with it rather than run from it. Yeah. But yeah, there's lots of reasons. I would say the majority of couples that I work with, one or both parties feel like any kind of conflict is a sign that their relationship is dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely recovery version of me saying, I need some friction to get some heat, I mean, yeah. And heat can mean anything, but, for me, like growth and intellectual stimulation and emotional stimulation. Yeah, certainly in my addiction, I was doing the opposite of that. I'm always interested to see what you talk about activates me. And it was when you talked about the negative risk of abuse, and coercion, manipulation kind of thing, and how that teaches us to not self-activate. And I was like, ah, that was it for me. But you also talked about, then versus now. I mean, yes, that's what I experienced as a child. It's not what I experienced particularly in my life today, except with, going back to, the people who resist the cultural shift.
Yeah.
I've had my cultural shift, or at least I'm in process with my cultural shift. And that was actually my real question is, when one of you is up for the cultural shift and one of you isn't, how do we negotiate that and navigate that?
It may fall into that category of I may not be understood right away.
Yeah.
And it's a question of how much do I want this relationship with you?
Yeah.
But that might require me to hold a self-definition line where I'm alone for a while.
Yeah.
Where I'm saying, hey, the door's open, this is what I want, let's do this. And I get no, 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 no. Or it may mean, okay, cards are on the table. Again, that would be we don't hold enough of the same values, or on this plane, we don't agree enough on the value that it will never work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I noticed divergence and clarity, differentiation, and all of this stuff is a positive. And I find that but I'm not in the same house with the people who are stuck, and don't want the cultural shift. But yeah, I mean, it is possible to be in the same house and to love your partner and still have, differing speeds of cultural shift, or, sometimes you just have to, do this, this background doesn't let me talk with my hands, but what you were doing earlier with the together and apart. Yes, yeah. That. So, and I can't believe your son is 13. And get ready for some differentiation and divergence, because it's coming. Oh, yeah. So, all right, let's jump into the Q&A feature. Seriously, your son was like 8 when I met you, or 9 maybe.
I am blown away by how long I've been doing these. I think this is year 5.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Okay. Into the Q&A. Thank you for these webinars. You're welcome. My porn addict, and on behalf of Jon, or for Jon, thank you, Jon, because Jon shows up here and donates his time and expertise. We're not paying him for this. Nobody's paying him for this. He's doing it because he's a good person and he wants to help people. And thank you. Okay, my porn addict spouse denies he is still an addict, and even had a therapist telling me he was just living a lifetime of pain and trauma. My question is, would an impact letter be beneficial to either of us without disclosure and continuing denial? His narcissistic tendencies keep him from admitting any fault about most things.
Yeah, the short answer is no, because a disclosure process is not an a la carte thing. Step 1, the disclosure is the foundation that impact comes from, and here's why. So we talk about the damage of an incomplete disclosure or a trickle disclosure. Forgive me for putting it this way. If this feels insensitive, I'm not trying to come there at all. You don't know the full impact on you until you know the full truth.
Right.
And then the third step would be restitution, which is how can we restore or right all the wrongs if we don't know what they all are? Every single time I've done a disclosure process, I have seen the landscape shift dramatically for the betrayed spouse and what they understand the hurts are that are on their plate. That's really awful up front. It's so beneficial in the long run. Right. Because then, talk about self-activation. Everybody has all of their feelings. We have all the truth on the table, and there's an equality. So what an impact letter can be without an adequate disclosure, it's a version of you begging, why don't you see me? Why don't you get me? Versus 2 people coming at an equal plane. All right, there was a train crash here and I caused it. I'm interested in cleaning up the wreckage. You're interested in cleaning up the wreckage. Let's do this together. So unfortunately, there's not a way to jumpstart that process. Denial is you could call it a bottleneck point. There's not a lot of workarounds for denial.
Yeah, I mean, when people come into inpatient, half of our job when they're in a residential treatment setting is just breaking through their denial and getting them to see the truth of what they've done. And they do have to come to that conclusion themselves, although I think there are different kinds of impact letters. There's the formal disclosure impact letter, which is one thing. We often have betrayed partners send a letter in very early in treatment, just saying, this is what I've seen, this is how it hurts me. It's not the disclosure impact letter, but it does often help break through the denial. Would you agree that that's helpful sometimes, or
Yeah,
I mean, it's a different kind of letter?
the expectations have to be calibrated again. That's exactly in line with risks of self-activation.
Right.
I may be willing to throw myself at that, not knowing exactly how you're going to respond, because I may be in that like divergence might be necessary here, and I need to see if you are going to get it or not. There's also like the power of in other settings they call it like a victim impact statement,
Right.
which is me voicing and it's owning the wounding and it's owning the hurt and it's owning the victimhood that I was put in or the way I was victimized. That can be a road back to reclaiming your voice. So I appreciate that distinction, Scott, because my mind went to formal disclosure process.
Yeah, which is definitely, and I think that's what this question was about, was the formal disclosure process. But I think there are actually times where it can be very helpful.
You're right about that.
But the formal therapeutic impact letter, which is a very specific thing. Read Steph Card's book, Courageous Love, if anybody wants to know about disclosure. Have you read that, John?
Yeah, I use that quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. So yeah, I'm glad you use it. Okay. And I want to address this too, if you don't mind. My porn addict spouse denies he is still an addict. Just once an addict, always an addict, or can we actually recover from addiction?
It's splitting hairs. I don't really care whether you call yourself an addict or a unicorn wrangler. I mean, I think you need to be focused on not what do I call this, but what am I doing and why? Yeah. And if I'm running into the same problems over and over again with the same outcomes, whose problem is that really? So yeah, I'm not an addict anymore. Okay, but I still don't like your behavior and it doesn't work for me. So what do you do about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Next one. My husband is doing really well in recovery, but through all the ups and downs of this 3-year process, I just don't feel physically attracted to him anymore. I feel like I have to force it. Our intimate life suffers because of this, and I find myself always wondering what it would be like if I chose a different path or wasn't with him anymore. The thoughts of wondering what life would be like with another person makes me sad, and I'm not sure what to do, just feeling very resentful and unattracted. There's not really a question there, John, but I mean, is this common? What does this mean? Go for it.
I know this one. I just learned about this, and it's like the most exciting thing that I've ever heard before. So at a conference I was recently at, Emily Nagoski was the keynote speaker. She wrote Come As You Are, which I was just talking to my spouse about this last night. It's one of the happiest, most positive books I've ever read, and one of the best books I've ever read on sexuality. It's written for women and female sexuality. But she talks in that book about, it's called the dual control process. This is how our brain handles pleasure, attraction, all of that. Basically what it means is you have things that put on the gas and you have things that put on the brakes for you, romantically, sexually, intimately, even in friendships. gas and brakes are not innate in us. We don't come out of the womb with the same system. Everybody, essentially, for gas and brakes, we are undefined at birth, and we learn throughout life. Our gas and brake system is built through experience. So everybody's is different, and everybody's is normal. There is no bad gas and braking system. So this is what I wondered when I saw the first sentence. What you're referring to here is the past is playing a big role on me. There's lots that's happened that's been pushing on your brakes. So what I learned from Emily is when there's a lack of desire or intimacy in a relationship, the first question to ask is, number one, what kind of sex or intimacy is on the table? There's nothing pathological about not wanting sex that you don't enjoy or intimacy that you don't enjoy. And then the second thing would be, is there anything in the environment that essentially has a brick on the brake pedal? Most couples look at adding to the accelerator and they neglect the brake. That's like driving around your car with the handbrake on. You can make some movement, but it's really tough and it uses a lot of fuel. So, not sure what I can do. There may be a further exploration of why your braking system is engaged, and is that something that can be resolved in this relationship? There may be some additional repair. There may be, like I said, there's so many things that add to that. That would be what I would look at first. And there's hints in there enough for me to make me think that the past betrayal, probably the biggest indicator here. That's not to say that over time we become more or less physically attracted to our partner. That happens too. But I would say dig there first. That is a very likely culprit.
Yeah. And physical attraction relates to intimacy. I mean, sure, somebody I don't know can walk down the street and I'll be like, hubba, hubba. But in a romantic relationship, physical attraction and emotional connection and intimacy are intertwined somewhat, or a lot, maybe.
Yeah, it's not a matter of I objectively find you hot and that's why I want you. In fact, as time goes on, our brain actually, like, connection and desire comes from different sets of neurotransmitters. Early on, it's like horniness, and later on, it's based on trust, commitment, friendship, all of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and that feels like what's stomping on the brakes right now.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna have to get Emily Nagoski's book, Come As You Are, people.
So good.
You are not the first. Did she speak at ITAP? I mean, where did everybody? Okay, because everybody's talking about Emily Nagoski right now.
She was so good.
Yeah, she must have been amazing. So thank you for your service, Jonathan and Scott. Great topic. First time watching live. Love watching the YouTube recordings. Thank you for all of that. I will have the video posted probably tomorrow at some point. Maybe this afternoon, but more likely tomorrow. I try to get them up quickly. I'm the betrayed partner, 3 years since first discovery, 6 months from the most recent discovery. When I asked my recovering sex addict for what I need, he agrees, said yes, but then his actions don't follow through, or he forgets. He is very confident, or he is very conflict avoidant, and sees a discussion/request as criticism, even when I'm very careful to choose my words and use I statements. Anything less than praise, he sees as our relationship never working. So I back down and shut up again, which is the long-term pattern of our relationship. When and how can I expect for him to get it and meet my needs? Oh boy, this is just right on topic today, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't speak to what's going on with your spouse or you, but just some things that are standing out here. I see this dynamic all the time, and it's not a problem with the model for like the partner trauma model. I think it's a really good model. It's done wonders for our understanding and our ability to help people in the position of the betrayed partner. But I think sometimes both for the partner and the addict, they get the idea, and not wrongly so, that the best thing to do to restore trust is to number one, do whatever a betrayed partner needs to feel safe. And number two, to do it now. Again, I understand where that comes from. Here's some of the problem that I see with that. If he doesn't understand why you're asking for that, if he doesn't think it's a good idea that he should do it, of course he's not going to do it. Of course he'll forget. With anything that we agree to that's not natural for us, our chances, think about those of you in addiction recovery, maybe how long it took you to get serious about boundaries on your smartphone or going to meetings, or why it's important you tell the whole truth. That may not have been readily apparent to you in the beginning. And you might have needed to been taught over and over again. You might have needed to engage with your therapist or your sponsor on, why are you asking this? And why is this a good idea? So saying yes immediately to what I'm requesting is not always a good thing. In fact, on this self-activation thing, I work with a lot of people where, they'll come in with a complaint, well, my spouse wants this, and I guess I'm just supposed to do it. And I'll say, no, you're not. And not because I don't think their spouse needs it, but because in order for a relationship to work, you have to have two brains and two intentions and two commitments there. And it makes total sense if there's something that you want and you're needing to ask for it. It makes total sense why you're asking for it, because clearly it's not readily apparent to him. And it might be helpful to slow down and to say, I don't want an agreement from you until you feel like you understand why I'm asking for this. And most importantly, why it's a good idea for you to do it. And that might take a lot more time. It may never get there. It's a better path to take than how fast can we get a yes, and then are we crossing our fingers to see if it'll work. Also saying there's a lot of empathy, like no wonder why there are requests and criticisms, because you're asking again and again and it's not happening. That tends to make a person angry, tends to make a person resentful. That's understandable. That's also for a lot of the addicts that I work with, that's a part of the relationship that is almost unbearable for them. Is why can't you just accept me? And here's what I say to them: unconditional love and acceptance is you can get that from your mom and your dad, and if you didn't, the window for that is closed. I'm sorry. Unconditional love does not exist in adult relationships. It shouldn't. Don't make it a goal, because it's not real. It's real for parents to their children, and that should be there. But every adult relationship is pay to play. So you better hope that you hear from your partner about things that aren't going well. I would ask your partner here, does he ever tell you about things that aren't going well? Does he ever harbor resentment for things that aren't going well? My guess is he at least harbors resentment. The harboring resentment's not a great thing, but the fact that I'm noticing things that aren't going well, that's good. It's like if you guys were traveling on a boat together and nobody was watching to see if there were holes in the boat. You both should be aware of what's not working, and you should be able to talk about it so that you can solve the problem. As far as when and how can I expect, I don't know. I'd have to know you both to be able to give any kind of timeline, but I hope that makes a little more of a clear outline. Try this path, not that one.
Okay. This next one, I'm going to give a little preface. Sex addicts have what we call circle plans that define their sobriety. The inner circle, or red circle, which is how I teach it, is bottom line problem behaviors. The middle circle, or yellow circle, is slippery stuff, and the outer circle, or green circle, is healthy stuff. I like red, yellow, green because it's pretty easy to understand. We all know what a stoplight is, So the question is, my sex addict spends most of his time in his yellow circle, so slippery behaviors. Therefore, I don't feel safe. He says he has not acted out, meaning red circle, in 8 months. Is that possible? He spends most of his day after work and most of the night on YouTube, which tends to be slippery, after promising again and again that he will stop, but he only stops for a day or two. So thoughts here, John?
First part of the question, sure, it's entirely possible that he's 8 months in a yellow circle and has technically not gone to his red circle. That's called edging.
Yeah.
And it's a very well-known behavior in addiction. It is like moving from downing 3 gallons of alcohol in a day to going to a 1 gallon slow drip.
Yeah.
It's not great for your brain. The yellow circle is not a place of safety. I think about it as a traffic light. A yellow light is not a everything's good light. It actually means slow down and make a careful choice of what happens next. So there could be a misunderstanding of the signals here. Yellow is not safe. Yellow is, I need to be thinking about what to do next. Not necessarily because I'll go to red next, but because this is no way to live. Green circle is the way to live. Green circle is what I'm putting in there as life affirming, spirituality building, recovery helping behaviors. So if you talk to any panel of addicts and their spouses, they'll probably disagree on this. The spouse may say, you might as well be relapsing because it feels that way to me. That makes 100% sense. Most addicts in recovery, it takes them a while to realize like, oh, recovery is not about setting me up to just get by. Recovery is about like complete healing, moving into my full potential, having the life I should have had all along. It takes a lot of work. Some are just so relieved to be out of the constant relapse, and the shame that comes with that is, and I would say, I'm trying not to use this pejoratively, but they settle for yellow. Well, at least it's not a full-blown crisis. That feels a lot better than where.
Yeah, and what I'll point out to guys like this is, yeah, you're not looking at porn anymore or whatever it is you were doing, but you're still escaping. You're still using a substance or a behavior to escape from life. What is the point of being in recovery if you're going to continue to behave addictively? Because this yellow circle, if it's going on this much and all the time, we need to redefine the circle plan here, because that needs to go in the red circle, because it's an addictive behavior. Addictive behaviors are used for emotional escape. I don't want to feel, I don't want to be bored, I don't want to be stressed, I don't want to have to self-activate because that's uncomfortable. So I'll look at YouTube all night. You're still escaping life. And the whole point of recovery is to start living life. And it's sad that he's not living life right now.
Yeah, it would make me curious if you ever show this to your partner, if your partner's listening, it would make me curious about what would need to happen in his green circle to help with feelings that put him in that yellow circle day after day after day. That's really what it's about. There's a need to be met. There's a discomfort. There's a hurt to soothe. And, the green circle is not, it's not the like, on paper, here's the ideal way to live life. No, this is how I live life in a way that my needs get met.
Right. Yeah. And again, yellow circle, it's a warning light, and it means you need to do something, not just stay there. It means you need to find a healthier thing to do. And that means going to the green circle. So yeah, I'm sad that he's calling this recovery, because it's not. But yeah, it's possible he stayed out of his red circle for 8 months. I agree with John. We see this a lot with what we call not porn. Guys will come to my porn addiction group and they haven't looked at porn in 3 years, but they've been looking at not porn, which is, YouTube and Instagram and, the bikini pics and and they're like, I've been using it just like it's porn. I need help,
Sorry, I'm laughing because as an addict in recovery, there's times where I look back to how I thought early on, and it's like, the capacity for denial and twisting reality was really something.
Addicts are the most intelligent people I've ever met. We can justify anything.
Seriously. Yeah.
No. All right. We've run a little bit over. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, John, as always, for being here. Anything you want to say to take us out?
Thank you, everybody. Great questions. Really enjoyed interacting. Scott, I'm going to have to talk to you about 2 weeks. I may not be around, but I'll send you an email. And
okay, just let me know and I'll update the schedule.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.